Coming up on the Purposeful Podcast. When you have the ability to make the choice that you actually think is best, just having that in your back pocket, knowing that you can draw the line and make those boundaries makes a tremendous amount of difference to your overall well-being.
You're listening to the Purposeful Podcast.
Welcome to this episode of the Purposeful Podcast. We're going to talk about some of the factors that contribute to being in good mental health, especially as it relates to personal finances. For our Giving Back segment this week, we're going to talk about what to do when a loved one asks you for money. The savings hack, Saki, I know, has a good one lined up, so you'll want to be tuned in for that. And then we're going to talk about some of the problems that come with being in an insecure financial situation and some of the potential solutions that you can implement in your own life so that you can have the freedom to do what you think is best and kind of control your own destiny. And that's one of the key fundamental aspects to having good mental health. So we'll talk some about that as well. But before we get started, we're going to kick this out to our intro.
You're listening to the Purposeful Podcast with Matt Fiebig and Saki Filios.
All right, brother. So we're going to start this episode with our Giving Back segment. And the question on my mind today is, what do you do when a loved one comes and asks you for a loan? That can be a very stressful situation, right?
It is stressful.
It is. You feel like, now my relationship with this person has been kind of held hostage, right, by the answer to my question. If I don't help them out, how is this going to impact our relationship? And if I do give them money, is it actually going to accomplish the objective, right? So you need to think about each request individually. One thing you might consider is, has this person come to you before asking for money or to someone else in the family? Because someone who is habitually asking for loans and never paying them back is someone who probably has some issues with how they spend their money. And continuing to give them more money may not actually help them resolve their issues. So sometimes saying no is the best thing to do for the loved one. If, however, this is a situation where, the person is typically reliable and dependable and they've found themselves in a pinch, perhaps by something that's happened to them outside of their control, you might evaluate whether you can do some good by helping them out. And then I think you have to think about the other side of the coin, which is, are you in the position to actually give what they're asking from you? Because even if it's the right thing to help them in principle, it may not be the right thing for you at that time. If you don't have the money available, for example, then the correct answer is, I'm sorry, I can't help you, even though I wish I could. The thing you don't want to do is put yourself in a position where you need to find money from somewhere else because you've given what you can't afford to give. So it's a very complicated situation, and it's one that you kind of have to analyze on a case-by-case basis. So let me ask you, Psyche, what kind of experiences have you had with loved ones asking for money?
Well, I've had a lot of experience with it, and I try to look at it from a Christian fundamental level, right? And, we always want to help everybody, but the two things for me are, one, can I afford to lose this money? So whenever a family member comes up to me and says, "Hey, I need to borrow money," I'm not big on loaning family money. I look at it as, hey, if do I have the money to give to you, and can I not be affected if I don't get it back? And then two, how is holiday family time going to be affected by this if I give you slash loan you this money? So that's why I kind of look at it that way. I don't like to mix money with family. I like to keep it separate because it does affect a relationship and I don't want it to. So if you're going to go into a agreement where you do loan a family member money, I would go into it with the belief that you're not going to get it back. And of course, you have to be able to absorb that, right? Are you in a financial situation where you can give that money and not get it back? So that's kind of the way I like to go into a situation like that.
Well, I like that very much. I think that's an excellent point. And in fact, I actually agree with you. And that's the way I look at it is instead of making a loan, make a gift. So if giving is the right choice, and if I have the ability to give without putting an undue burden on myself by giving that money away, then instead of loaning it, I will just give it to the person and say, hey, look, this is something that I'm doing for you. It's burden free, right? You take it, you do what you need to do with it, and then God willing, you'll be in a situation at some point in the future that you can extend that same grace to somebody else in the future. And part of the reason that I have that attitude is because I've had that grace extended to me. And when I was in a time of need, I had folks offer to meet that need for me. And it never was conditional. It wasn't, I'll give this to you if you repay me. It was, I'm going to give this to you because I love you. And I trust that you're going to be able to work through this. And then in the future, when you're in a position to help, hopefully you can help somebody else. And in that way, you're kind of paying it forward. And I think that's the best way to look at it. So, the first thing to quickly review is it the right thing to give the money to the person? Is this a situation where it's a one-time need from a person who generally has it together, or is it a situation where you may be enabling someone to continue in some bad behavior? So if the answer to that question is this is a one-time situation and it's the right thing to give, then the next question is, can I give what they're asking, or can I give anything at all without creating an undue burden for myself? And if the answer to that question is yes, then go ahead and give the money, but strongly consider giving it as a gift instead of a loan, because that'll free that other person from that emotional burden that they would carry, knowing that they've got to figure out a way to pay that money back. And then hopefully down the road, they'll be in a situation where they can do that for somebody else. So that's our giving back segment this week. And it's definitely worth thinking about because as times get tougher, this is going to be a situation that more and more of us encounter with our loved ones. I'm going to kick this over to you, and you can tell us what your savings hack is for this week.
So, in line with that discussion, savings hack of the week is to delay big purchases. A lot of us, if we go to buy something big, it comes to our mind, we kind of impulse buy, and then we have what we like to call buyer's remorse shortly after. We've all been there. So what I've started doing the past few years is once I've thought that I wanted to make a big purchase, and this is on an individual level, you can assign a dollar figure to it however you want to, as a little rule for yourself. But if you're going to go make a big purchase, don't go buy it right away when it's hot on your mind. Sleep on it, give yourself a week, live life thinking about it and not owning it for, say, a week. And after that week, if you still want it, odds are you probably have a use for it, or legitimately need it. And of course, that separates the wants from the needs by giving it that amount of time, right? So just you'll be surprised at how often, if you don't go impulse buy that and you just sleep on that purchase and think about it and stew on it for a week, you'll be surprised what large percentage of time you end up discovering you don't need it and you end up not making a purchase.
It's an excellent point too, because you may find that you don't want it as badly tomorrow as you want it today.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference, you know. When you allow yourself to go through these emotional cycles and, you know, there's a continuum, right? Where at one point in the day you may feel, I really, 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 really want this. I really need it. I want it. I'm going to spend money and do it now. Then there's the other side of the spectrum where it's like, you know, I can probably live without that. It would be nice to have, but I'd rather have the money in the bank, you know? So when you when you have
Exactly.
that opportunity to go, you know, through the whole continuum of emotions and then step away from it, it kind of gives you the perspective that you need to decide whether or not that's really a good choice for you or if it's not. And that really makes a big difference when it comes to making a sound financial decision. And that's really what you want to do.
Yeah, and it might keep your wife a little happier with you too if you don't show up with the brand new pressure washer at the house that you really don't need when you could have just hired someone to pressure wash.
Well, on the flip side of that, if you're going to advise your wife to sleep on it, that might be something that you want to agree to do before she's in the mood to buy whatever it is
Exactly.
she wants, right? But that is a good thing to do, you know, really to kind of expand upon the theme a little bit, is to have an agreement in place beforehand as to
Yeah,
what is considered that kind of an expense and what's not. You know, maybe you have a dollar amount in mind that you consider, oh, well, this is a big expense. We'd better talk about this or we'd better think about it before we pull the trigger. Whereas maybe there's something that's not as big of an amount and it doesn't matter as much. And you kind of give each other permission every once in a while to be impulsive and say, oh, well, you want to spend 30 bucks on a book or 50 bucks on a dress, have at it, you know, enjoy yourself. You got a little bit of latitude there. But if it comes to something bigger, like I want a new TV or I want a new fridge, pump the brakes a little bit and think about it.
exactly.
Decide whether or not that's the right choice. We're going to transition, I think, to the main topic of today's episode, and that's the mental and emotional impact of your personal finances. And it does have a big impact. You know, there are some fundamental things that really kind of set you up for the quality of life that you're going to have. And so you might consider your family relationships, you might consider your intimate relationship with a spouse or a partner. You're going to consider your career and whether or not you're doing a job or you're doing something, you know, meaningful that you really have a passion for, that you really love. Well, one of the big factors that contributes to your overall well-being is your finances, because if you're insecure financially, you find yourself in a position where you may feel anxiety on a regular basis about what might happen if your car broke down, what might happen if there was an unexpected expense that popped up, what might happen if you got into a pinch at work or maybe you got laid off. Those sorts of things really hover over you and they never quite go away. And the problem with that is that you actually have a physiological response to that where you know you have the hormones pumping through your body and your blood and you're constantly in a state of attention and alert. You know, what's going to happen if this happens? What's going to happen if that happens? And that anxiety can be very aging, you know, physically to you, and it can cause conditions with your blood pressure, your heart health, all kinds of other problems. So this is one of those things that really can impact all aspects of your life. You think about your personal relationships as well. When you're tired, when you're stressed out, when you're anxious and afraid, you may find yourself saying or doing something that you would later regret. And of course, that is exactly the kind of thing that can put stress on your personal relationships. And so all of a sudden, it ripples through all of those different aspects of your life that are the most important to your well being, and it puts all of them on an uncertain edge. So it can really be devastating if you find yourself in a position of significant financial insecurity. So I know we've all been there, Psyche. Uh, Tell us a little bit about a situation where you've experienced that situation in your life.
Oh yeah, we've definitely all been there, and this is one of the main reasons why I wanted to start a podcast was to help people with financial literacy. I've obviously been through that in my life. We all have, and I remember what it felt like to have more month than money left over. And you make different decisions. It affects all areas of your life, and it's hard to focus. It's hard to thrive. So I was willing to do anything to get myself out of that. And it starts with telling yourself that you just don't want to live that way anymore. And you want to be able to make decisions for the long term and have solid foundations.
Well, that takes me to the next aspect of it, which I consider to be your personal freedom, right? So Sunday was Easter, and it also was the end of the Passover week. And during the Passover, the Jewish faith is celebrating the freedom of the Jewish people from the slavery that they experienced in Egypt. And there is so much richness to the book of Exodus, but there are so many lessons that apply to our daily lives. And you really think about, what does it mean to be a slave? What does it mean to be in indentured servitude? Really, as it applies to your personal finances, the question is, can you say no when you feel like you need to? You know, if you're in a bad spot at work, if you're in the wrong job, if you need to get to another place than where you are, can you put the boundary down and say, I'm going to go this far, but I'm not going to go further? I will tolerate this much, but I will not tolerate more. And I know that if I had to move, if I had to leave, if I had to go somewhere else, I have the ability and the freedom to do that. Just having that mentality to know that you could do something that you need to do that is consistent with your values, that is consistent with where you are in your life, that brings your stress level down several notches. You're still going to be in a situation in life, whether you have money or you don't, where you're going to be in some uncomfortable situations. But when you have the ability to make the choice that you actually think is best, just having that in your back pocket, knowing that you can draw the line and make those boundaries, makes a tremendous amount of difference to your overall well-being. So when you don't have that, the alternative is you're kind of walking on eggshells, right? And I've been here. This is the story that I have, where I wasn't doing practices that led to good financial situations for myself and my family. And so I was in a spot where I'm in a job that I don't love, and I've got a boss that doesn't like me and that I'm not too crazy about, and I'm working overtime all the time just to make ends meet. I'm not getting ahead, I'm not saving, I'm not able to do the things that are going to give me some financial security. And I have this overwhelming stress all the time, this anxiety. You know, what happens if I say the wrong thing? What happens if I irritate my boss? And here I am, I'm being told to do some things, at the time I was working in collections, and debt collection can be a bit of a shady industry if you're not in the right spot. And so it's like, I'm being asked to do something that I'm not comfortable with. Well, can I say no? Not really, because if I say no and I get fired or I get let go, well, what am I going to do? I'm that far away from catastrophe all the time. And so the choices really aren't mine to make. The situation that I'm in is dictating the choice for me. I don't have that choice. I just have to do what I have to do. That's that's very hard, and it's not good for your mental health and well-being, I can tell you that. So having that freedom to say, I just don't think I can do that. I don't think that's the right thing to do. It makes all the difference in the world. It doesn't mean that if you do say that you're going to lose your job. It doesn't mean that it's even right to walk away from your job. But what it does mean is you have a way out if you need it. And there's so much benefit to having that if you're in that situation. So I highly recommend that you give yourself the ability to say no if you need to. And so that takes me to, where are we as Americans, right? Because there's a huge difference and disparity even among, certain age groups. Obviously, folks that have been working longer will tend to have more in savings on average. But I wanted to bring a couple of numbers into the picture to illustrate where people are, because the odds are, as our listeners, you're going to fall somewhere on this spectrum and you're going to relate to some part of what we're saying. And so I want to look at the average savings of Americans by age and then look at some median numbers, right? Because averages, when you take all the savings together and then you divide it by the number of savers. So if Psyche and I are the pool of savers in this situation, and say between the two of us we have $100,000 in savings, well, the average savings is $50,000 a piece. But if I have 1,000 and Psyche has 99,000, then you're going to find that the median is not as good as the average. And you can see that if you expand it to three savers. So Psyche, Matt, and individual, unnamed individual, John Doe, right? So the three of us have $100,000 between us, but Matt has 1,000, John Doe has 1,000, and Psyche has 98,000. Well, the median is 1,000, because you got one on the low end and you got one on the high end, and the one in the middle is the median. So you can have an average of 33,000 or a median of 1,000, and that tells a very different story depending on where you are in the situation. So with that in mind, I've got some numbers here that go back a few years, but it's still useful information. So your averages for those 35 and younger have an average balance of $11,200 in savings. Well, to illustrate, the median is 3,240. So that's about a third of the average. What that means is that people who save tend to save a lot more, and people who don't save tend to have almost nothing. And the statistics bear that out, because if you actually think about it, it's something like a third of Americans don't have enough in the bank to cover a $400 unexpected expense. And $400 is not 11,200, it's not even 3,200. So if a third of people don't have enough to even cover a $400 emergency, that basically means they don't have any savings. The alternative at that point is to go into credit card debt. And obviously, that'll put you in a bad place in a hurry if you're not careful. So, let me kick it over to you real quick, Psyche, and get your initial thoughts on savings habits and how that can, really have an overall impact on your well-being.
Yeah, well, it's directly correlated. I mean, it has every impact on your well-being. Um, so this is right on trend. The one is my one child there. I was talking to two of them, and one's 19 and one's about to be 20. And I was showing them the amount of savings everybody from the decade, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, trying to give them the idea of, hey, how would my life be if we started saving earlier? A lot of people, we just don't start saving early enough. We don't develop good financial habits or financial literacy early enough in life. So we end up playing catch up most of the time. And they have, at their age, like I said, 19 to 20, they've started their Roth IRA accounts. So they're contributing already. And they looked at these numbers and they could see the big difference. They're going to graduate college debt free with an emergency fund and a Roth IRA started. Now, they're not rich. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's not like anybody here is rich. No, we're not talking about that. We're just talking about financial literacy and smart financial decisions. So imagine the difference in life for, let's say, a 22-year-old, if that's what their average age is when you graduate college. Imagine the difference that you're going to encounter in your life if you can graduate debt free with an emergency fund and your retirement account already in place, as opposed to what the average person has statistically. That allows you to make these life decisions through arguably the most influential years of your life, really. I mean, the decisions you make from 22 to 30 are some of the most important decisions that affect you for the next 30, 40, 50 years. So imagine, I mean, just look at the difference that makes, what the decisions you're allowed to make differently because you're set up that way.
Right. And that's an excellent point too, because where you start directly influences where you finish. Not just your financial life, but your career, your family, all of these things. If you're in your mid to late 20s and you really want to have kids, but you're not in a financial position to even make ends meet for you and your spouse, well, you may not be able to do what you think is best. You may not be able to pursue having a family at this point. Maybe you wanted to have 4 kids and now you've got to seriously consider whether you can even have one or two. The freedom that comes with having the ability to make the choices you want, that you think are the right choices for you, that's a big deal. That's a very big deal. You always want to have the ability to do what you think is right for your situation based on what your values are and what your goals are for your life. One of the big problems that people experience is regret, right? And regret is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum from purpose and meaning. It's like the absence of purpose and meaning. It's perhaps the unfulfilled, unrealized purpose and meaning. I could have done this, but I didn't. I should have done this, but I didn't. I couldn't, for whatever reason. And that leaves a little bit of a hole in your heart. And
Yeah.
you may always regret what you didn't do, where you didn't go, what you didn't see, the things that you didn't do with your life, the relationships that you didn't have or make because you couldn't. So when we talk about having that rainy day fund, having 6 months of expenses in the bank for whatever may happen, we talk about getting started with saving for your future so that you know that whatever may come, you've got your bases covered, right? You're in a situation where your basic needs are going to be taken care of, so you don't have to have the fear and the anxiety that comes with worrying about whether or not you have those things taken care of. Now, look, wherever you are in your financial life, you're always going to have an element of that, right? But if you have $1 million in assets, savings, cash, real estate, retirement accounts, things like that, and you're in your 30s or your 40s, would you like to have more? Yeah. Do you need more? Yeah. What if you have zero? Well, then you go from I would like to have more and I have the ability to pursue it to I don't have anything. What am I going to do? That can debilitate you. That can paralyze you. And the truth is, if you're in that situation, you didn't get there. Most likely, you didn't get there because of one event in your life. You got there because of an accumulation of choices that you've made. And the good news is that you can make different choices. But the hard part about it is that it's it's something that you need to start doing as soon as possible. So if you're not in the habit of saving, you need to get in the habit of saving. If you are in the habit of spending impulsively, you need to get out of the habit of spending impulsively, because just just switching those two around, getting out of impulsive spending, getting into saving, you're going to live a completely different life, and it will be a healthier life. It will be a better life if you do those things. It's very important that you do it.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you. You have to first choose to be happy, right? And that's what it comes down to for me. Enjoy life and start moving on from there. The beautiful thing is we do control that, right? That's not controlled by external people or things or circumstances that happen to us. We get to control what we do with our life. So we make different choices, form different habits, and start moving forward on the path we want to go forward on.
Well, that's it. You can never get yourself in a situation where you can control everything around you. Life is going to happen. Things are going to happen to you, good and bad, that are beyond your control. But if you prepare for that, if you accept that that is the way the world works, and you put yourself in a situation to weather the storm, you're going to be in a better spot. And that's really what we want to emphasize today, as we give our closing thoughts, is look at what you can do to make your life better. Look at what you can do to improve your financial security. And you don't have to change everything all at once. Find what you might call the low-hanging fruit, right? What are some easy things that you could do, that you would do if only you thought to do it? Spend the time, think about it, and then do those things and see where you are in 3 months. The thing about improvement is a little bit over a long period of time goes a very long way. If you're not swinging for the fences all in one swing, and you handle this as an incremental situation. All right, I'm going to change one bad habit, get out of one bad habit, get into one good habit, and I'm going to do that for 30 days. Where am I at the end of 30 days? Great, it's better. All right, let's do another bad habit and another good habit. I'm going to get rid of one more bad habit. I'm going to start doing one more good habit. 30 days. Where am I at the end of that 30 days? Much better. Compare that to where I was 60 days ago. Way better. You do that for a year, do that for 2 years, do that for 5 years. You're going to be so much healthier, happier, and more secure. You won't even believe that you're living the same life.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. And one of the areas I'd like to touch on, and I think is necessary in this day and age, is social media. So I think sometimes as people, we put too much emphasis and too much of our attention on what everybody else is doing on social media. You know, everybody else's picture looks amazing. Everybody else's life looks amazing. Everybody else's family looks amazing. Well, you know, regardless of whether or not that is their reality or that's not reality, you know, we need to focus more time on ourselves and our family. We're not trying to keep up with anybody else. And it's very detrimental to our own mental health when we continuously compare ourselves and our family to other people and their families. So that's a big proponent for me. Don't get on social media and, you know, drool over other people's lives, so to speak. You know, don't be, oh, I wish, you know, look how good their life looks. I wish our life was like that. Or Bob just bought this boat. I wish we could buy this boat. Live your life the way you want to live it, that makes you happy, the correct way, and don't compare it to other people.
Really, in the end, to live a meaningful life, to live with purpose, no one's going to define that for you better than you can for yourself, because what's important to somebody else may not be what's important to you. And you really need to decide what do you want to do with your life. You've only got one life to live. And once you make that decision, you know, it's not that you can't correct the course along the way. Of course you can. But you're going to be pursuing the things that are the most important to you. And what kind of good in the world could you do if you were willing to do it? What kind of good could you do if you put yourself in a position to have the freedom to choose to do it?
Yeah.
Those kinds of things are going to give you a sense of self-worth, satisfaction that you can't get from anywhere else. There's not a boat in the world anywhere that can give you the kind of satisfaction that comes from knowing that you're doing what you were put here to do. And part of being in a position to do that is making sure that you're financially secure. So really it's a bedrock. It's a foundational issue that's going to set you up to live a better life. And that's what we want to see happen. That's what we're here to help you do. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and close the show. I want to invite you to join us again in the future. And if you're interested in learning more, look through our catalog on YouTube or on Rumble. You can look through our audio directory, pretty much on any podcast directory of your choosing. And please leave us comments, leave us feedback, and reach out to us if you have questions or ideas. You can do that by sending us an email at thepurposefulpodcast@convergentdigitalmedia.com. For now, we look forward to seeing you again. We hope you have a great week, and we hope that something that we've said today helps you get on the road to your financial freedom.
Thanks for listening to The Purposeful Podcast with Matt Fiebig and Saki Filios. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to join us on Locals at thepurposefulpodcast.locals.com and find us on YouTube and Rumble by searching for The Purposeful Podcast. If you like this podcast, don't forget to rate and review. This has been a production of Convergent Digital Media. Visit convergentdigitalmedia.com for more info. Thanks again for listening to The Purposeful Podcast.